It happened just a few months ago. I moved to Maplewood for a fresh start. I was excited about my new job as a history teacher. I thought I could settle down and make some friends. The town looked ordinary, but it wasn't. While unpacking my boxes, I heard my neighbors arguing. Their voices rose and fell about a chicken fight. I froze, unsure if I should eavesdrop or look busy. I felt something darker in the air, but I couldn't catch all the details. All I knew was that their tension made me uneasy. Weeks passed. I tried to connect with people. Most were friendly, but something felt off. It was like they were hiding something behind their smiles. One afternoon, I sat outside with coffee and saw strange symbols on my fence. I felt a chill run through me. I remembered the same markings on a barn down the road a few days before. I decided to ask my neighbors about the symbols. They all seemed hesitant to talk. "It's just an old thing," Mrs. Hawkins told me, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird. Her nervousness made me think they were hiding something important. I couldn't shake the feeling that Maplewood had secrets buried deep. The more I dug, the more I learned about that chicken fight. It wasn't just about the chickens. Two families lost so much. I felt drawn into their pain. I could almost see how that tragedy echoed through the town like a ghost. I tried to piece together the story, but it slipped through my fingers. One evening I went for a walk to clear my head. The air felt heavy. As I passed a vacant house, I swore I saw someone looking at me from a window. I turned to check, but no one was there. My heart raced as I walked, and I thought I heard whispers on the wind, soft and distant. I glanced over my shoulder, but saw nothing. When I got to my front door, the air grew thick. I felt it pressing on me like something was waiting. Then I heard a voice say, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but the street was empty, just me and the flickering lights of the houses nearby. A wave of dread washed over me. It felt like the town was alive, but with something dark. I went inside, locking the door behind me. My heart pounded as I sank onto my couch. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But then I remembered the symbols on my fence. I knew they meant something. I returned to the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever had spoken to me. But there was only darkness outside. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the whispers like ghosts just out of reach. I felt trapped in a place where the past refused to stay buried. Maplewood held its secrets close, and I was right in the middle of it all. I woke up the next morning feeling drained. I couldn't shake off the weight of the night before. The whispers still echoed in my head, feeding my anxious mind. I went to school, but I struggled to focus. My students noticed. A few of them whispered to each other, exchanging curious glances when I spaced out. At lunch, I decided to confront Mrs. Hawkins again. I needed to know more about those symbols, and it felt like she was my best bet. I walked to her house feeling nervous but determined. This time the front door was open. I knocked hesitantly before stepping in. "Hello," I called. The house felt empty, almost too quiet. I moved into the living room, where stacks of old newspapers were piled high. It looked like a scene from a hoarder's home. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a muffled cry from the back of the house. I was torn between fear and curiosity, but the urge to find out what was happening pushed me forward. I followed the sound down a narrow hallway. It led me to what seemed like a small storage room, the door slightly ajar. I could barely make out a figure inside. "Mrs. Hawkins," I called softly, taking a step closer. The figure turned, and it was indeed her, but she looked different, like she had seen something that terrified her. I felt a rush of panic. "Are you okay?" She shook her head. "You shouldn't have come here." Her voice trembled, and she pointed toward a box in the corner. My curiosity got the better of me. I moved closer to inspect it. Glancing inside, my stomach dropped. There were old photographs, yellowing with age. Most were of families and gatherings, but there were a few images that showed the chicken fights. The families looked familiar. Then I noticed something bizarre. The last photo was of a chicken with those very symbols I saw on my fence tattooed on its feathers. Before I could process it, Mrs. Hawkins closed the lid hastily. "You have to leave now. It's not safe to be digging into this." Her eyes darted past me, as if she was waiting for something. I backed away slowly, confused. "What do you mean?" Before I could push her further, a low rumble vibrated through the house and the lights flickered. I could almost hear whispers again, this time louder and more urgent. Suddenly, Mrs. Hawkins shouted, "Get out, now!" I turned and bolted toward the front door. Outside, I glanced back to see her standing in the doorway, her face pale. "They won't let you leave," she screamed. I ran, heart racing, back to my own house. The weight of her words pressed down on me. What did she mean by they? I slammed the door, locking it behind me. My mind raced. Something was definitely wrong in Maplewood, and now I was in deeper than I ever intended. I needed answers, but was I ready for the truth? Then I heard it again, a faint whisper from the corner of my living room. "You shouldn't have looked." I jumped at the sound. The voice was like cold water splashed on my skin. I wanted to ignore it, to convince myself I was imagining things, but I knew better. I had to face whatever was happening. I took a deep breath and turned toward the whisper. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence answered me. I strained to listen, waiting for something, anything. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the tension. It was a text from my friend Jane, asking if I wanted to meet. My fingers hesitated over the screen. I needed to talk to someone, but I didn't want to drag Jane into whatever was going on. Still, I knew I couldn't stay alone. I texted back, "Yes, I'll come over." I grabbed my jacket and the keys, glancing one last time around the living room. The shadows seemed to cling to the walls, twisting in shapes I couldn't quite make out. I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. I bolted out the front door, locking it behind me, trying to ignore the growing anxiety in my gut. The sun hung low in the sky as I walked to Jane's house. The brisk autumn air helped clear my mind. I tried to focus on the colors around me, the leaves turning, the faint sounds of laughter from children playing in their yards. But the image of that chicken, marked with the symbols, lingered. It seemed like a warning. Jane greeted me with a warm hug when I arrived. "You look pale. Everything okay?" she asked, leading me to the couch. "Not really," I admitted. I poured out my story, telling her about the photographs, the whispers, and Mrs. Hawkins' warnings. As I spoke, I could see Jane's expression change from concern to confusion. "You're kidding, right?" she asked, laughter barely covering her disbelief. "A chicken with symbols? That sounds like a bad horror movie." "I wish it were," I replied, my nervousness creeping back. "This is real. Something strange is happening in this town, and I need to figure it out." As I spoke, I noticed the shadows in Jane's cozy living room. They felt heavier, darker than they should. I shook off the feeling, forcing myself to pay attention to Jane's responses rather than dwell on my unease. "Well, what do you plan to do?" she asked. "I think I need to go back to Mrs. Hawkins," I said, a sense of urgency rising in me. "I need to understand what those symbols mean. Maybe she can help me." Jane sighed. "You really want to do that? It sounds dangerous. What if something happens?" "I know, but I have to. I can't go on like this." Just as I finished speaking, we heard a loud bang from the kitchen. We both jumped, exchanging frightened glances. "What was that?" Jane whispered, her eyes wide. "I don't know," I replied, feeling the tension coil tighter in the air. We stood up, peering cautiously into the kitchen. I was about to suggest we check it out when a cold draft rushed past me, making me shudder. That's when I saw it, something darting behind the fridge. My heart raced. "Did you see that?" I gasped. Jane nodded slowly, fear creeping into her eyes. Maybe we should just go outside. But before I could respond, the lights flickered. For a brief moment, everything went dark. My heart raced as darkness enveloped us. I could barely see Jane beside me, but I could hear her ragged breath. The silence felt thick, almost alive. Just when I thought we might find a way to escape, the lights flickered back on. I blinked against the sudden brightness. The kitchen was now empty, the fridge standing quietly against the wall. I took a hesitant step forward, peering behind the appliance, but saw nothing. "What just happened?" I muttered, shaking slightly. "I don't know," Jane said, her voice trembling, "but that was creepy. Let's just go outside like I said." Before I could reply, a loud crash resonated from the back of the house. It sounded like it came from the basement. A chill ran down my spine. "Did you hear that?" Jane nodded, her expression twisted by fear and uncertainty. Yeah, we should call someone." "Like who? My dad? The cops? It's not like they're going to believe us." I was pacing now, my mind spinning. Would anyone even care about whispers and shadows? "Okay, but we need to do something," Jane said, her voice gaining strength. "There's something wrong in this house. I can feel it." I looked at her, realizing we had two choices: to run or to face whatever was hiding in the dark corners of Jane's house. "I think we need to check the basement," I said, feeling a mix of dread and determination. Jane's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Fine, but I'm not going first." "Fair enough." I took a deep breath and made my way toward the basement door. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. Each step felt heavier, filled with an unshakable feeling of being watched. I turned the knob slowly, and the door opened with a reluctant groan. The basement lay before us, a dimly lit space filled with old boxes and forgotten furniture. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air felt damp and cold. I took a hesitant step inside. "What are we looking for?" Jane whispered, barely keeping her voice steady. "I don't know," I admitted, "but maybe it's connected to those symbols. If we can find anything that makes sense, maybe we can figure out what's happening." As we moved further in, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping for clarity, but instead, it was another message from Jane. Confused, I glanced at her, but she was standing still, eyes trained on something in the corner of the room. What's that?" she asked, her voice wavering. I turned to follow her gaze. There, in the dim light, was an old chest, its surface covered in dust and faded markings that sent shivers down my spine. There were symbols, the same symbols from the photos, and now they appeared to be glowing. "That can't be good," I murmured, pushing back mounting dread. "What's inside? Should we open it?" Jane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, the noise returned. A low, rumbling growl echoed from somewhere deep within the shadows. The air shifted heavy with a sense of impending chaos. "Let's get out," I started, but I was interrupted by a crash as the lid of the chest flew open, revealing its contents. And that's when I realized this was just the beginning. A dark figure leaned over the chest, shrouded in shadow. My heart skipped a beat. Was it a trick of the light, or something much worse? "Jane," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "we should get back." But it was too late. The figure lunged forward and I stumbled back, colliding with Jane. The air crackled with energy, thick and suffocating. We both gasped in shock as a stream of light erupted from the chest, illuminating the basement in a cold glow. Inside the chest, I could see objects glittering, ancient coins, shattered mirrors, and a tattered journal. But what caught my attention was something dark and twisted lurking among the treasures. It looked like a small talisman, carved with the same symbols we had seen before. "Did you see that?" Jane cried, backing away, her wide eyes reflecting the light. I started, but the growl returned, now deeper and closer, rumbling through the floor beneath us. My instincts kicked in, urging me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the contents of the chest swirled violently, as if caught in an unseen vortex. The journal flew out, pages fluttering like desperate wings. It landed at our feet, and I instinctively bent down, heart racing as I flipped it open. Scribbled notes filled the pages, detailing strange rituals and horrific accounts from two families bound by tragedy. "Do you see this?" I asked, not looking up. "They mention the symbols. They must mean something." Before Jane could respond, the room grew colder and shadows coiled around us like living beings. "We need to leave now," she shouted, panic rising in her voice. But as I reached for her hand, the growl morphed into a cacophony of whispers echoing off the walls. Join us," they hissed, and I could barely breathe. Out of instinct, I grabbed the talisman from the chest as I pulled Jane backward, but it felt too hot against my skin. Its glow intensified, almost blinding, casting strange patterns on the walls. Then everything stopped. The whispers faded, and the growling fell silent. I blinked, half expecting something to lunge at us, but the basement returned to eerie stillness. "Did we just... What was that?" Jane stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I think we disturbed something," I said, trembling. "Something that's been waiting a long time." But before I could process what that meant, a loud bang echoed from above us. The sound of heavy footsteps thundered through the house. I glanced up at the ceiling in dread. "We need to go, now." As we turned to leave, the basement door slammed shut. I tugged at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift ominously. Someone or something was still in the house, and it wasn't finished with us yet. The door wouldn't budge, no matter how hard I pulled. I could feel Jane's breath quicken beside me, her fear mingling with mine. The shadows grew thicker, moving with a life of their own. With a last, desperate push, I slammed my shoulder against the door. It rattled, but didn't open. "Is there another way out?" Jane asked, glancing at the dimly lit corners of the basement. Her voice trembled, and I could see her pulse racing at her throat. I shook my head, searching for anything that could help. "Maybe if we could push the chest," I suggested, eyeing the large wooden trunk. It seemed like a long shot, but we were running out of options. Together we approached the chest, our hands trembling slightly as we gripped the edges. The air felt charged again, as if something was watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. We heaved at it, but the moment we tried to move, the growl returned, more low and menacing. "It's coming from over there." Jane pointed to the far wall where shadows pooled like ink. A cold sweat dripped down my back as I turned to look, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I saw it. A shadow emerged, taking form like wisps of smoke coiling upwards. It gestured toward the chest, and I froze. A distinct voice pierced the silence, clearer than before. "Open it." "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Jane, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. She nodded, wide-eyed. "What does it want?" I didn't know. It felt like a trap, but the talisman in my pocket burned fiercely against my skin, urging me to act. There wasn't time to think. I made a decision. On 3, we push it open. I glanced at Jane, her face pale with apprehension. 1, 2, 3. With all our strength we pushed against the chest. It creaked and groaned but began to shift. The growling intensified, wrapping around us like a storm. I felt something snap inside me. Fear turned to frantic determination. We couldn't let this be the end. As the lid cracked open, the air erupted with a rush of wind, and I glimpsed something caught inside, a tangle of threads. They danced in the chaos like trapped souls, shimmering with tense energy. A vision crossed my mind, a split-second image of the two families mentioned in the journal, intertwined in agony and regret. "Look," I shouted, pointing at the threads. "They're connected to the talisman." In that moment, the whispers returned, now a chorus of voices pleading for release. The shadows turned sharper, revealing distorted faces within them. I felt Jane gripping my elbow, but I couldn't break my gaze from the chest. "Join us," they echoed again, as icy hands reached out from the darkness. Suddenly, everything went dark. The lights flickered and died. I knew it was too late to back down. As I reached for the talisman, a surge of energy coursed through me. But before I could act, a chilling laughter rang out, leaving me paralyzed with dread. "Welcome home," the voice called, and just like that, the dread settled in my bones. It was clear. Our confrontation was only just beginning. I stumbled back from the chest, heart racing. The laughter lingered in the air, mixing with the whispers that turned desperate. "What the hell is happening?" I gripped Jane's arm, fear tightening around my throat. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. I fumbled for the talisman, hoping its glow might cut through the shadows, but it felt muted. Straining my eyes, I tried to discern shapes among the swirling gloom. "Please, let's go," Jane urged, her voice nearly breaking. I could feel the tension in her body. She was ready to bolt. But where would we go? "Wait," I said, trying to calm her. "If we ignore this, we might be trapped here forever." I could hardly believe my own words, but the urgency loomed larger than my fear. Suddenly, from the depths of the darkness, the growling returned, louder and more intense. My breath quickened, panic creeping up my spine. It sounded almost like laughter again, this time mocking. "Is it coming?" Jane whispered, her face pale but determined. I shook my head, scanning the room for any means of escape. That's when I remembered the journal. "There has to be something in that book," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. The dim light illuminated Jane's anxious face, but it barely touched the shadows enveloping us. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice echoing unnervingly in the silence. Desperation clawed at me. The journal contained the family's stories, their hurt, and maybe even a way to break the grip the shadows had on us. "Over there," Jane pointed, her hand trembling toward the other side of the basement, where the flickering light barely reached. "But the shadows—" "I can't just stand here," I shot back, cutting her off. My feet moved instinctively, carrying me toward the spot where the journal lay discarded. As I stepped deeper into the shadows, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Voices whispered all around me now, rising and falling like a haunting melody. They were filled with pain, sadness that reached out to pull me in. When I reached the journal, my fingers brushed the cover, and a jolt of energy rippled through me. It was warm. Somehow the talisman pulsed in time with the words on the page. "Read," a whisper demanded from the darkness, and I opened the book, my heart racing. The pages fluttered as if caught in a breeze, settling on a section about a confrontation between the two families. Something about a betrayal and a destructive fight. I furrowed my brow, piecing together the stories. I needed to understand how this connected to us. But as I read, a sudden scream echoed through the basement, sharp and piercing. I jerked my head up. "Jane?" My voice faltered as the shadows shifted violently, coiling around my legs like snakes. In an instant, I understood. Someone, or something, wanted us to relive their tragedy. "We have to leave," I yelled, gripping the journal tightly. The stairs seemed miles away, blocked by an advancing tide of darkness. Just as I turned to find Jane, a shadow lunged from the dark, pinning me against the wall. Cold fingers clutched my throat, tightening my breath. "Join us," it hissed, and the darkness surged, blotting out everything. "Jane," I screamed, twisting to escape the grip that threatened to pull me into the shadows. I fought back, heart racing. But amidst the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Jane's terrified face, and that's when I realized we might not be alone in this fight for our lives anymore. I struggled against the grip of the shadow, my windpipe tightening with each breath. It was as if the darkness itself wanted to swallow me whole, dragging me down into an abyss of despair. I kicked instinctively, my heels hitting the cold basement floor as I tried to create distance. "Get away from me!" The grip loosened just a fraction and I seized the moment. Using all my strength, I pushed against the wall, trying to escape. My heart thudded in my chest, desperate for freedom. "Jane!" I shouted again, my voice hoarse and frantic. In that instant, I saw the journal slip from my grip and crash to the ground. The pages scattered like leaves caught in a storm, fluttering far from me. I felt a fresh wave of panic. Everything we needed was in there, and now it was lost to the shadows. But there was no time to think. I had to keep moving. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I wrestled free, ripping myself away from the shadow's grasp. I stumbled backward, still trying to catch my breath. I couldn't see Jane, but I could hear the soft, frightened whimper somewhere in the darkness. "Jane!" I called again, moving cautiously toward her voice. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, the shadows layering over me again. The laughter resumed, this time more jagged and cruel, echoing off the basement walls. I squinted into the gloom, searching for her, when the journal's glow caught my eye. Some of the pages had landed open, shimmering with a faint light. I darted toward it, knowing I had to reach it first. The deeper I got into the basement, the louder the voices became, rising into a cacophony of grief. "Help us!" they cried, but I couldn't decipher if they were asking for mercy or demanding vengeance. I grabbed the journal, flipping through the chaotic pages. My fingers brushed over a passage that caught my eye. "Revenge can bind you to the past forever." I stopped, my heart racing again. What if the stories were the key? They were linked to the hearts of the families trapped here, and maybe they held the answers we needed. "Found you," I shouted, finally spotting Jane curled up against a corner, her eyes wide with terror. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as I realized the shadows were starting to close in on her too. "Get up, we have to go now." I reached for her, pulling her to her feet. Just as we began to move, the shadows surged forward, blocking our path. The air thickened, becoming nearly suffocating. I held the journal tightly, feeling its warmth pulse with the danger surrounding us. Then everything went dark. The light from the journal flickered as if responding to something far more sinister. My heart sank. We were trapped. A low growl echoed through the basement, a sound that reverberated through my bones. It felt more alive than before, as if the shadows had taken shape and were now watching us. "Not again," I muttered, panic rising. Just then, a silhouette emerged at the edge of the light. It was humanoid, but wreathed in shadows, its eyes glowing like embers. I froze, paralyzed by fear. One thing was clear, we had to confront this terror. Whatever it was the embodiment of the tragedy, and it was hell-bent on dragging us into its pain. "Run!" I yelled, pulling Jane with me as we darted toward the basement steps. The figure lunged, a twisted mouth opening in a howl, ready to unleash something darker than the shadows themselves. We bolted toward the stairs, adrenaline pumping in my veins. Jane stumbled behind me, her small hands clenched tightly around my arm. "Keep up," I urged, glancing back just as the figure lunged again. It was faster this time, the darkness gathering behind it like a wave, ready to crash down on us. I pushed harder against the steps, feeling the cool wood beneath my fingers. The light from the journal flickered dimly, and for a moment I thought I could see the outline of the basement door just ahead. "There, we can make it," I shouted, trying to keep our fear at bay. As we reached the top, my heart sank. The door was locked tight. Panic seized me. I rattled the handle, pulling with all my strength. It wouldn't budge. "No, please!" I yelled, resigned to the possibility that we were losing our chance. The growl from behind intensified, now mixed with whispers that grew clearer, more desperate. "Help us," they pleaded. I could feel the weight of their sorrow suffocating me. I didn't want to linger among the remnants of their grief. "Jane," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "We need to find another way out. Do you see anything?" I scanned the walls, searching for a window, a crack, anything. At that moment, Jane hesitated, her eyes wide. "The journal," she breathed. "Maybe it can help us." Before I could respond, the shadows shifted. The figure advanced, its eyes narrowing, revealing a glint of malice. "No escape," it hissed, the sound screeching through the basement. There was something familiar about it, but the fear made it hard to concentrate. "Jane, hold on tight," I said, pulling her closer while trying to think through the panic. I recalled the passage I had read. "Revenge can bind you to the past forever." Maybe it needs something from the journal. I fumbled with it, flipping through the pages in a frenzy until words jumped out at me. An incantation, an invocation of memories. It was worth a try. I cleared my throat, my voice trembling. "You who are bound by sorrow, hear us," I called, feeling the words resonate within the suffocating darkness. The figure faltered, shadows retracting slightly, as if unsure of what to make of my utterance. I pressed on, pouring every ounce of desperation into the words, "Release us, let us go. We are not part of your story." With each syllable, the air grew thick with energy, buzzing and crackling around us. Jane's eyes sparkled with hope as she joined in, echoing my incantation. Together, we invoked the tragedies of the families trapped in this sphere of despair. Then, I felt it. A burst of warmth from the journal surged through my fingers. I could see the shadows recoil. This confusion energized me, igniting a flicker of courage. "It's working. Keep going, Jane." But just as the figure began to fade, something shifted. A second form emerged from the depths, a dark silhouette erupting with furious energy. I barely had time to process it before the air turned electric and everything went still. Then I sensed a chill under my skin, like fingers brushing against me, sending chills racing down my spine. "You think you can escape?" The first figure snarled, more threatening now as the second form loomed larger. My stomach churned. Whatever they weren't done with us yet. "We have to," I started, but suddenly the journal slipped from my hands again, falling to the ground. And that's when I saw it. The pages were glowing brighter than before, revealing a new direction, a path I hadn't noticed until now. I stared at the glowing pages, the words shifting and rearranging themselves as if forging their own fate in real time. "Look," I shouted, grabbing Jane's wrist, "it's showing us the way out." The figures wailed, their shouts echoing through the basement. "You can't leave. You belong to us." The threats grew higher, sharper, clawing their way into my mind, but I couldn't focus on the despair. There was a way out, and it was right in front of us. "Follow me!" I yelled, pulling Jane toward the glow, urgency propelling us forward. The shadows writhed behind us, gathering strength as we rushed past the chest and toward a flickering light that seemed to pulse with hope. Each step felt like breaking through a surface tension, the air shifting from suffocating to welcoming just ahead. "Wait." Jane hesitated, glancing back as if expecting to see the dark figures clawing at our heels. "What if it's just more of the same?" "We don't have a choice," I replied, determination laced with fear. "We can't stay here." I felt reckless, but we were losing time. The shadows still closing in echoed our fear. We reached the light and suddenly everything felt surreal. The journal whispered to us now, guiding us toward a small passageway that hadn't been there before. The air shimmered, revealing a doorway woven into the darkness. "It's the only way," I yelled again, not looking back. "Together, then." Jane clasped my hand tightly, and we pushed through the opening, leaving behind the growls and haunting whispers. The moment we crossed its threshold, an unimaginable force surged around us, pulling us through a whirlwind of colors and sensations. I felt lighter, unshackled from the shadows, yet still tethered to the remnants of those spirits. But the reprieve was short-lived. We stumbled to the ground, landing in an unfamiliar space filled with a soft, warm light. We blinked against the brightness, gasping as reality solidified around us, a sunlit park, children playing in the distance. I had never seen anything like it before. "What just happened?" Jane asked, looking around as if expecting the darkness to swallow us up again. I didn't have an answer. "I think we escaped," I said, uncertainty creeping into my voice. We were no longer bound by whatever had held us, but lingering questions danced in my mind. What had we unleashed? And were we truly free? We stood up, brushing ourselves off. The chill of the shadows faded, but awareness hung heavy in the air. Remembering the journal, I searched my pockets, but it was gone. Had we really left it behind, along with the pain that had haunted us? I glanced at Jane, who wore a mixture of relief and apprehension. "What do we do now?" "I guess we go home," she said, hesitating, as though the weight of the knowledge we had unburdened still loomed over us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Maplewood's secrets weren't forgotten. They were only waiting, smoldering beneath the surface. What if it starts again? I pondered aloud, the thought chilling me. Jane met my gaze, her expression mirroring my fears. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." And as we walked away, the last echo of the whispers danced through the edges of my mind, soft and haunting. "You shouldn't have looked." I turned back towards the park, letting the familiar sounds of laughter mingle with our own uncertainty. I hoped it wouldn't come back, but I knew there were things unresolved. Darkness still waiting to be understood, hidden truths wrapped in shadows. Maplewood had changed us, even if the town itself lay ordinary once more. And as we moved further from that darkness, I still couldn't shake the feeling that our past was waiting just at the edge of our memories, ready to intertwine again when we least expected it. And perhaps someday, I'd have to face it once more.